So, some of you I've seen before, maybe some of you have heard the story, but for those of you who haven't seen and heard about SPHR, we are all about providing innovative monitoring and diagnostic devices for the critical care, which forms part of a $3.2 billion market. You can see a picture of our current system up there. It consists of a monitor, which is next to the bedside of a patient, which then displays the results of a sensor. The sensor, unfortunately, I don't have a laser here, is on the intravenous pole down there, which is integrated into the arterial line of a patient. So what you do is you draw blood back up that line. It dwells on the sensor. We do a number of readings, and we report those values on the screen. That system is called Proxima, and that's what it's all going to be about today. So our first generation product, Proxima 3, has been launched to early adopters to gain feedback, and we will launch the next generation, Proxima 4, later this year. Proxima 4 will increase the addressable market 4 times compared to Proxima 3 through added functionality. We have also spent a lot of time over the last 2 years to strengthen the board and management. I came on board roughly 2 years ago. We have got a new chairman since June 2015. We have a new CFO on board since August 2015. And we also have a number of sector-specific non-executive directors. We raised $13.2 million in April last year from sector specialists, and we are very proud to actually be the first investment from Woodford's Patient Capital Trust, who invested alongside with Arthurian Life Sciences. For those of you, that's the fund that's managed by Sir Chris Evans and his people, and also Life Science Partners. We are planning to identify a commercialization partner to sell Proxima worldwide going forward. What is the clinical value proposition that sits behind Proxima? Now, frequent blood sampling is required to manage critically ill, unstable patients and improve their outcomes. It provides vital information to the clinician on the patient's physiology, i.e., is the patient improving, deteriorating, being stable. And the current solutions have significant barriers to actually measure this more frequently than is currently the case. Now with Proxima, we have a patient-connected blood gas, electrolyte, and metabolite solution, which provides better patient management during a patient's critical period, while at the same time reducing the nursing workload. It gives you faster and more frequent production of results. It avoids blood loss and reduces infection risks. In fact, one of the most leading clinicians here in Europe, Professor Jean-Louis Vincent, who is our chairman of our medical advisory board, thinks that Proxima has the potential to bring about a paradigm shift in the way we are doing things today. So that's the backdrop of why are we working on Proxima and commercializing this. What's the current practice of doing these measurements? They are the most frequent test performed in critical care nowadays. And there are key indicators of your lung and your kidney function. On average, you take a test every 3 to 4 hours. For critically ill patients, that could be up to 90 measurements a day. That's roughly every 1.5 hours. Now, there are also patients who it's even indicated that they should be measured every hour or even more often. But they are not captured here right now. In the current state of affairs, the nurse takes a syringe full of blood from the arterial line from the patient, and she leaves the patient. In that time, the patient is either alone, or she has to find somebody, or he has to find somebody who covers during the time of absence. You open the arterial line to draw out the blood, and actually every time you open an arterial line, you can actually put an infection into the arterial line. The blood samples are then moved within the critical care or inside that area or also outside that area. And sometimes, as you can see down there, it's also sent to the lab, which could mean a delay of anything between half an hour and a full hour. What does this actually mean? And what we've done is we've actually shown some real data that we have collected during our evaluations to date. On the left-hand side, you see what time a nurse would spend on average if she had to do blood gas measurements every 3 hours for 3 days over a 72-hour period. So you can see the pure working time is 3 hours, over 3 hours, just doing blood gases. If you were to increase that to every 2 hours measurement, that even goes up to 4.8 hours. So if you then have to have somebody who covers you during your absence, I mean, that time of the combined time of the nurse and the person covering is actually a staggering 8.8 hours if you were to do the measurements every 2 hours. And you can see on average the nurse would be away from the patient 2 hours or in fact 3 hours depending on the frequency. That's a long time to be away from somebody who's critically ill. So first and foremost, why don't people measure more often is they just don't have the staff. The nurse also has to do something else than just measure the blood. Second one is actually blood loss. And you can see on average a 3-hourly measurement would be 125 milliliters loss of blood. And increasing that, it goes up to 185. And a unit of blood is just about 200 to 250 milliliters of blood. In fact, 90% of all patients in an ICU become anemic. That means they have lost so much blood that they have to have blood transfused. And that is a big risk to the patient, and it's also very expensive. Roughly 2 units of blood cost about 750 pounds, full cost. That's not just the blood, it's everybody who handles the blood and has to sort of look at certain things. If you look at the increased infection risk, you have to open up the line 48 times, or respectively 72 times. Or you carry around a syringe full of blood, which could be contaminated. Just think of somebody, a patient has flu or Ebola, and you're carrying around their blood in the hospital. What happens if that spills somewhere and then gets transmitted? You can easily spread that disease within the hospital. So the less you carry blood around, the less you have to handle blood or open lines, the better for the patient and for the carers. So with Proxima, we have a disposable patient-attached device. It's a closed system mounted in the arterial line. Closed system means you don't have to open up the system to take the blood out. It accompanies the patient throughout the pathway within the hospital. For instance, you could fit the device before the patient enters surgery. You can monitor your patient during surgery, and that can follow the patient into a recovery room, into the ICU room, wherever the patient goes. You have a continuum of care with the device connected to the patient. You can collect the data at the patient's bedside, which means you don't have to leave the patient anymore to do the measurements. And you have a faster turnaround time to results. Because you stay right there, the results are shown within 3 to 4 minutes. We return all the blood back to the patient. And this enables, in the long run, more frequent measurements of the blood gas and electrolytes. It's a multiple-use disposable, which has approval for 72-hour use. So depending on how many measurements you want to do over 72-hour use, you only need one disposable for those 3 days. So what are the patient and clinical benefits? It enables better patient management during the most critical and unstable period. It also allows you to give you faster feedback if there are urgent interventions you have to make. For instance, if the patient is on a ventilator, struggling with the oxygen, you might want to change the settings of the ventilator. But you need to know very quickly whether your settings are actually effective. So you need to take a few blood gas measurements pretty quickly after you've changed those settings. With a normal routine, that will take a lot of time and a lot of until you actually know whether that setting is effective. With Proxima, it can be a matter of minutes before you know whether those settings have changed in the right direction. There's an avoidance of disease transmission through more effective patient isolation. We no longer carry syringes around. Blood stays at the patient, in the patient. We have no blood loss due to sampling, and thus we reduce the transfusion risk and the inherent cost of complication. Just to give you an idea, if there's an infection of your arterial line, the consequential cost of managing that patient until they're well again can be between $22,000 and $30,000. So one infection is extremely expensive. So people will do everything to avoid them. So what does that actually look like in terms of nursing time? So what we've done is we've plotted Proxima against the conventional way. And we have shown here Proxima being done every 2 hours. So instead of 4.8 hours working time, you can do that in 3.2 hours. So instead of 8.8 hours, the nurse plus their cover, you can do it in 3.2 hours. You don't leave the patient's bedside. The nurse is always at the patient. And you can see no blood loss. We open the line a few times to actually calibrate and set up the system, but we don't carry around any syringes. So you can see that we can reduce up to 46% of nursing workload. No time away from the bedside, no blood loss, and a 75% reduction in the opening of the arterial lines. So we don't only claim it, we can prove it. Here's an example of a patient where they monitored the blood gases every 30 minutes. This patient was undergoing cardiac surgery and being on bypass. What that happens is they basically stop your heart and lung, and an extracorporeal circuit has to pick up the function of the heart and the lung. And what you want to try and achieve is you want to keep the patient between those two tram lines, the black upper and lower limits for the pH, CO2, and oxygen we show here. The longer the patient is between those two lines, the better the patient fares, because that's what's considered to be normal. So if you are wildly out of sight of that range, you could be in serious trouble. So you can see nicely that they saw, for instance, at the top, the pH after 2-3 hours went south. They changed settings and they got it back into range again. And you can see the same happen then subsequently with the CO2. This is considered to be a patient they managed very well. And you would expect that this patient would recover more quickly than somebody who has spent more time outside of the normal physiological ranges. On the oxygen, because the patient is not on a ventilator but on a bypass, they oxygenate the blood. So they pump as much oxygen in the blood as they can. Very interesting. One of our medical advisory board members got very excited when he saw that. He says, everybody knows not enough oxygen is bad for you. You might get brain damage or whatever. But people are thinking, what happens if you get too much oxygen? People know about free radicals in your body, what they could do harm to your cells. So actually just pumping oxygen in the body and hope for the best is not a great idea either. So that curve at the bottom there could potentially already in a few years' time be a big problem. But you also want to keep that closer to the normal ranges. So this just gives you an example of somebody who's doing a great job of frequently measuring the patient during cardiac surgery, that patient has the best chance and the shortest recovery time within the hospital after the surgery. Now, the market itself is a $3.2 billion worldwide market for blood gas and electrolyte testing and growing at roughly 3% per annum. Within that, there's about $1 billion point of care segment, which is growing at almost 5%. So there's a shift away from the lab to the point of care testing. And with Proxima, we are truly at the point of care because we are connected to the patient. The global potential revenue of Proxima is estimated to be beyond $200 million per annum. We're not there today, but we can get there. Now, the revenue model is proportional to the number of patients you treat. So the more patients will be using Proxima, the more revenue we will achieve. Roughly on average, we would expect to have one disposable per patient for the 72-hour stay, because most patients don't stay longer than 2 to 3 days in an ICU. The ASP is fixed for the 3 days. So the more you test, your price is fixed, whereas the conventional way is that you pay per test. So the more you test, the more expensive it gets. So we also want to take away the pain from testing more frequently, not just in terms of nurse workload, blood conservation, but also that it doesn't become more expensive. And the COGS we are planning are in line with industry standards. What's our product strategy? I just said the more patients we have, the more revenue we can achieve. So Our strategy is to increase our market penetration through product evolution. The current generation Proxima 3 can measure the parameters pH, CO2, oxygen, and potassium. It's ideally suited for patients who have respiratory diseases, and ECMO is a very specific one. Those are people who are extremely sick. It's approved for adults, and we can address roughly 10, maybe 20% of the ICU population. With Proxima 4, the next generation, you can see we're going to add sodium and glucose. And with that, we can look at patients who need glycemic control. That's controlling insulin. So it's got nothing to do with diabetes. Every patient in ICU has pretty strongly varying insulin. So you have to monitor that and keep it within normal ranges. Neurosurgery is another one, or cardiac surgery. We will also get the approval for pediatrics of more than 15 kilograms body weight. That's 3 years and over. And with those changes, we can already get to the 40 to 50% of the patient populations in ICU. And the next generation beyond that, we call that 4+. We are planning to add lactate. And with that, we are aiming to treat patients who have sepsis, trauma, or complex surgery. And you can see with that, we can even further increase the potential patient population we can use Proxima on. So with every successive generation, we want to be able to treat more and more patients within the ICU. So what is our go-to-market strategy? Proxima 3, we hired a small direct sales force, and we sell directly to early adopters in limited territories in Europe. So we have 4 or 5 salespeople right now on board. The idea is not to generate revenues. The idea is to get the product being used, because we need feedback on how the product is being accepted, being used, and also collect the kind of metrics that I've been showing to you a bit earlier. But more importantly, we also want to prepare the market for the future product generations. Proxima 4, we will launch also into the established European countries. It will fully replace Proxima 3. And then we aim to find a partner who can sell it to customers in all of Europe. And we can also start looking at markets and getting approvals in the US and Japan, and then start selling Proxima on a worldwide basis. And with Proxima 4+, we sort of aim to deliver annual innovation increments to the market. So it gives you roughly an idea when we think we will be launching Proxima 4+. And the objective is that we build an active customer base with recurring revenues. Because remember, our revenues are directly tied to the number of patients which are being managed with Proxima. So where are we? We launched Proxima 3 for sales here in the UK in September 2014, and roughly a year ago in the rest of Europe. We've hired our direct sales team selling to the UK, Germany, Netherlands, and Belgium, and we've achieved our first sales in UK and Germany. And a typically early adopter sales cycle takes about 9 to 12 months. But we are seeing increasing interest in Proxima. To date, more than 20 hospitals have trialed and evaluated the product. We've connected more than 90 patients, and we've been picked up in 120 articles in the clinical press. And we also see an increasing momentum. If we look at the second half of the year of 2015 compared to the first half, more than 60% growth in the number of leads we have generated. And more than 70% growth in terms of the hospital who have actually evaluating the product. And the evaluations have actually shown that we can improve and reduce the time between ordering a test and actually having the results and being able to treat your patient between 40 and 60%. Our revenues last year were modest, but we're not focusing on revenue. It's all about getting that feedback from early adopters. We are continuing a very tight financial control and keeping our operating expenses below budget. We had 6.1 million. We capitalized for the first time just under £1 million on R&D, and we have very minimal capex requirements going forward. And with our cash balance, we were better than budget, and we're moving into 2016, we had more than 10 million of cash, which should take us well into next year. In terms of Newsflow, we will keep you up to date in terms of continued sales progress. Proxima 4 is already submitted for CE marking, so once we have received them, we will inform the markets, and obviously once we also launch it for sales, we will also inform the markets. We will inform you about additional clinical evaluation results as they become available, and obviously if you manage to sign up a commercial partnership deal with one of the big companies out there, we will also let you know. I've run out of time, but I think it's fair to say with Proxima we have a very unique patient-connected solution which provides better patient management during a patient's critical period while reducing the nursing workload, faster, more frequent production of results. We avoid blood loss and reduce infection risk. We have strong endorsement from leading European clinicians and a very attractive global revenue potential of more than $200 million per annum. And we have a very clear commercialization strategy underway. Launch 3 into Europe, get feedback from the market. We have met all our development milestones with Proxima 4, and launch is expected later this year. And we want to find a commercial partner who can sell that for us in the rest of the world. And we are well supported by institutional investors. And with that, thank you.
Time for questions. Questions, anybody? Oh, quite a few hands. Gentleman there, gentleman there.
How much will the device cost, I say, for the Proxima 4, and can it be reused for another patient?
The only reusable part is the monitor. The disposables you would not want to reuse because that obviously they're infected from somebody else's blood. What we typically find is that people are willing to pay a slight premium on the disposable and replace the monitor for free. That's the sort of current usage model that we see, and we don't see that changing any near term. In terms of the actual price, I would guide to later on. We will going to have some research available. I would guide to getting the numbers from there.
Gentleman just over here.
In August 2015, you lost the possible partner, Ortho Clinical Diagnostics, because of the Carlyle Group. What are you actually doing, and what has been happening about trying to find a commercial partner? And is that still the way that you're going to be really trying to sell this product, or are you trying to do something completely different now?
Okay, 3 questions in one. I'll answer the Ortho Clinical Diagnostic piece first. Now, Ortho Clinical Diagnostics was part of Johnson & Johnson when the original deal was signed, and Johnson & Johnson had a sales force which could sell into the operating room and the ICU. Ortho Clinical Diagnostic only has lab-based equipment, so it had these huge machines for blood typing, etc. So when Carlyle bought them out, the only part of the sales force that went with that carve-out was the lab sales force. So they were faced with the question, if they wanted to continue, or let's say, be our partner for commercializing Proxima, they would have to build up a sales force which is capable of selling into the ICU OR. They decided to stay in their core area, which is the lab, and therefore they did elect not to negotiate commercialization rights. So where are we right now? We have since then approached other companies who do sell into that kind of space. These discussions are ongoing. While we as a small company are nimble and very fast in our decision-making, big companies are notoriously slow. So we have met other companies, we are in the process of talking to them, but we can't give any guidance as to when a deal might be possible, because that ultimately depends on their decision processes. We definitely think that a company or 2 companies with worldwide presence is the right way to go because they have the salespeople. I know I have 5 people. I can only do as much work and sell as much product. That's not big. You need literally tens to hundreds of people who can sell this product worldwide if you want to achieve that number we put out there.
Next question.
Yes, can I go? So thank you for that clarity on distribution. It's also, I would comment, having done distribution, a bit of an eggs in one basket situation, which is obviously what you saw with J&J. So do you have a backup plan for that?
There are, let's say, various options in terms of how you can play a partnership game. Some companies want to have worldwide rights, so it's all eggs in one basket. Some might only want to have European rights or US rights or Japanese rights. So I think once we get clarity in the discussions on where we're likely to end up, we might then also elect to sort of widen the discussion and not only elect to go with one company. Okay. But it's too early to really speculate on that.
I have a second one, if I may. The Osborne effect, if you remember that, where somebody produced the first mobile computer, then advertised the second one and destroyed themselves because nobody would buy the first one. I'm very conscious of you giving us a roadmap. Is Proxima 3 going to sell at all, or are they all going to wait?
Those who have the patience, again, we might remember we talked about patient groups for Proxima 3. That's a small part. Only those who have those patients will look at using and buying Proxima 3. All others will wait for 4 or later versions. So it is not about trying to destroy your market. It's about trying to understand what patients you can actually use Proxima on. And part of our key learning is that you don't approach a hospital saying, right, you can use it on all patients, because that's not going to work. It can only be used on a small patient group. So part of our sales process is actually identifying those who could, at this point in time, already use and buy Proxima 3. And that's where we also want to spend our time on. So yes, I think we will see modest sales of 3, but again, the game is not about big sales numbers in 3. It's about preparing the ground that when 4 comes, you can see that the patient population is 4 times that. And if we then get the partner with associated feet on the street, we should see bigger numbers coming through.
Thank you.
Okay. Next question. I think there's another gentleman behind.
Just for clarification, the 200 million, that was the market size or your share of the market?
That would be what we could, the share we could achieve. But that would be worldwide sales in sort of future product generation. So that's not 3 where we are right now.
But given the pressures on the NHS in terms of infection, in terms of nurses, etc., etc., I mean, why aren't they sort of knocking down your door and wanting the product?
Let's put it this way. There's one thing about a manager talking about pressures. If you then go talk to clinicians and nurses, the story is slightly different. No, we manage. We don't have a problem. Actually, what we are telling people, they have to really own up and say we have a problem. Because once they understand and tell you, yes, we have a problem, you can move to the commercial discussion. Till then, it's always a great idea. Yeah, no, maybe. What, I have to change? I have to train my people? No, I'd rather stay. So the barrier to change, the resistance to do something new, is the biggest barrier that we have to overcome right now. And that's why I just think that in some hospitals, the pain on the floor is not big enough yet for them to sort of run into the door.
The gentleman just there by the door, and then there's another one at the back. Time just for those 2 questions, I think.
Okay.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
Could you, for a matter of interest, tell me what advantages, presumably there are advantages of moving from near Cambridge to South Wales? And
North Wales.
Is it North Wales?
It is North Wales.
Okay. For example, in cost of operations, and have you increased or decreased the staff? I think you had 50 odd in Cambridge.
We start off in the production site in North Wales is St Asaph, or Llanelwy. I practice my Welsh, yeah. We already have a existing commercial clean room there, because it was very clear that our site in Cambridge, while we can do very small amount of production there, it can't really scale up to bigger, larger numbers. So we're always looking for an existing clean room where we could do commercial scale up. And that's where the opportunity of going to North Wales does come in handy. I think the cost of a production operator in Cambridge compared to North Wales is slightly cheaper. But that was not the main reason. The main reason was really to try and find a good area where we have access to good skilled staff and an existing clean room facility.
Same number of staff?
It is pretty much what we did is actually transfer it's a handful of production staff from Cambridge over to Wales. So we didn't actually increase, we sort of kept flat.
Have you had an approval for a medical device like the CE mark in the UK and Europe and the USA equivalent?
Well, Proxima 3 has the CE marking.
Proxima 4 just follows on from that, does it?
Yes, so what we've done is we've submitted all the technical files for CE marking. The process for Proxima 3 took almost a year, I think 11 and a half months or something like that. So we are in the middle of that process, but right now we are seeing no barriers that we can't get that CE mark later this year and then also launch as we have indicated.
Thank you very much, Wolfgang.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Bye.